All right. So, Gareth, you had a few questions before. Let's tackle your questions and then proceed from there.
Sure. There was actually just a couple of questions regarding Chapter 1 real quick. I know we've already
Okay,
covered
Chapter
that.
1 questions before we hit Chapter 2. Go ahead.
Sure. I was reading in Chapter 1 about like the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors and CCIM and stuff, and just wondered how much effort I should put into studying those aspects for the exam.
From the mock exams, if you look at them, probably not a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Anything else?
One question, but I think my uncle already answered that for me because he's an agent as well. Just it wasn't sort of divulged in the book, but when you register with the real estate board, so for example, the Toronto Real Estate Board,
Right.
Are you limited to operating within the boundaries of just the Toronto Real Estate Board, or say one of your friends is moving from Toronto to, I don't know, Oakville?
No, you're allowed to operate in Ontario because you're Ontario licensed.
That's what I thought, but I just wanted to see clarification from you.
Right.
Okay, yeah,
That's
really
it? Awesome. Okay, let's go to Chapter 2 then.
Cool.
Okay, Chapter 2, the first thing we're talking about is RICO. So RICO was established in 1997. That's when their doors opened. So the reason why their doors opened was they wanted to do regulation activity upon brokerages, brokers, and real estate agents because everyone was kind of doing whatever they wanted to, and there was turning out to be a lot of court cases coming up from people not working ethically. So what they wanted to do was make a uniform method of having all brokers and salespeople working on the same level, same professionalism, same honesty, same code of ethics. Okay? So there was obviously RICO created a couple of things for us. So let's name them off. So they created the code of ethics is number 1. Number 2, they created the continuing education programs that apply to us after our first 2 years, right?
Yep.
And then they opened up an insurance program, which is our errors and omissions insurance, which you're aware of. And that's like our car insurance. It's mandatory. You have to have it. You don't have a choice. And just like car insurance, if you have an accident or a claim, your premiums go up. And fourth, what they wanted to do was achieve the Real Estate Act reform, which in simple English, that means they wanted everyone to behave professionally, ethically, and behave so that it was all uniform across the board. Okay? So we got those 4 things. And also remember, they created the complaints process for other agents and the public. Okay? Now, RICO can conduct a routine inspection into the broker's office at any time, provided they've already had a mutual agreement, and it's always a reasonable time, usually 9 to 5, right? Also, remember they can do a random inspection. And do you know do you know the extent of where RICO can come and inspect in your office?
Reading through the book, I think it was paperwork and things like that. They can ask you to provide information regarding the trust account of the brokerage as well.
Oh, absolutely. So that's the first thing they can do. They can ask you to look at all of your bank accounts that are related to the brokerage. They can ask you to show your personal possessions within the office. Okay, believe it or not, they can actually come into your office and say they can come into your office and say open up your drawers if they wanted to. So they can check all the personal belongings and your files and the bank account. So everything
what is the purpose of them examining your personal effects?
Let's say, for an example, we'll be very hypothetical. Let's say that, for example, that you showed a property and the owner claims that you've taken a gold chain that belongs to him. RICO comes in with that complaint, says open up your drawers, and they find the gold chain in your drawer. Something like that could happen. Or let's say that you are keeping personal items or IDs of people that do not belong to you, or you're keeping copies of things where there's some identity theft, and they want to come in and check and see if you're involved in that. So it's usually criminally motivated for them to go to that extent. I have never seen RICO come into any office that I've worked at for 12 years and open up drawers and check anybody's stuff. I've never seen it happen. That would be a criminally motivated complaint where they would want to do something like that. That would have to be something very intense for them to be involved to come to that degree to check that out. It's almost like the same scenario of police. You don't see your friends being, raided by police constantly, right? It's not a typical scenario. It's got to be criminally motivated. Okay?
Yeah.
We just want to remember that because there's an exam question that actually asks you that. In that scenario, that would be true. It gives you a few options and asks you if it can do that sort of stuff, and RICO can do those things. Okay.
So are RICO officers actually officers of the law in the sense that they can arrest you on the spot,
No.
Can they? Would RICO be able to fine your brokerage?
RICO can absolutely fine you and the brokerage because RICO is allowed to regulate RICO licensed people. So because you are a part of RICO, they can regulate what you're doing. They're not going to arrest you on the spot, but unfortunately, if someone is involved in that kind of scenario, they will call the local authority and get them further involved in the charges. But remember now, if RICO comes in and sees it with their own eyes, their witness statement is very strong. Right?
Yes.
So that's the whole purpose of RICO. It saves the police somebody getting away with murder in that scenario of real estate fraud. Okay? Also, so we're going to remember that RICO is enforcing all of the code of ethics that are in REBA 2002. So that's basically our code book, our rule book, however you want to view it. And the insurance, of course, they establish it, they administer it, so they've already created it, and they're going to enforce it. So what three things does the insurance cover? The insurance covers three things: your consumer's deposit, your errors and omissions.
But what is consumer's deposit?
Just like when you bought a condo, David, you put a deposit down.
Yeah.
That's insured by your real estate agent's insurance.
In case of theft or whatever.
Well, not really theft, but say like there is, say the brokerage goes bankrupt or something like that happens, or whatever the case is, there's insurance to come into play. So if you did a private deal with a private transaction, there's no insurance on your deposit. So if Gareth gave money to David and David said, "See you later," it's going to have to go to court 3 years later when there's available date.
Yeah.
So that's the risk of doing a private transaction, right? So you can tell your client, because you're doing your transaction with me, your deposit's actually insured. So that makes it better for him. That makes more sense. Even though that when you're working with a buyer, you're paid by the seller, so your buyer has all of this free protection, technically. Errors and omissions means errors. If you make a mistake, you said 2 fridges, there's only 1, you might have to owe him 1. Omissions is you forgot something or you omitted something on purpose. So you didn't tell the new buyer that the basement's been leaking for the last 5 years. You could have a big problem in the future if it goes to RICO, right? Your commission coverage, so of course that's your commission now. So if your brokerage shuts down, your commission is insured, right? Because offices can shut down, things can happen. So now we'll look at RICO's functionality, inspection, and investigators. I kind of already covered that. There's a courtesy inspection, and then there's one that's random. Yep.
Quick question, sorry, regarding the insurance coverages that we just discussed. I was reading in the book that about how the various policy limits, like consumer deposit, $100,000 per claim, $1 million per occurrence,
right,
things like that.
Right.
Those little details, we're going to need to know those for the exam.
In the exam, it's not that detailed. It just actually asks you to remember what's included in the, like of the 3 things. You wouldn't have to actually remember. It's up to $100,000, but it's good to read it up and just know, because that's more the fine print that applies to like when you actually put it to use.
Sure.
But in the exam, I haven't seen any questions. So like if we look at the last 2 mock exams and the last 15 students in the last 3 months, I haven't heard that question come up yet.
Okay.
They usually recycle questions from the last 5 years over and over, but we haven't seen that. I haven't seen that one so far.
Okay.
But it's still good to know, just in case.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen it come up, so right now I would say no. It's not an exam question at this stage.
Sure.
So the education, they established the minimum requirements for what you needed, and they established the continuing education program. So now you guys are taking phase 1, 2, and 3. And when you finish phase 1, 2, and 3, you are a temporary salesperson, okay? And when you finish your articling courses over the next 2 years, right, The articling courses that get completed allow you to become a permanent salesperson. And then the 2 years after that, or the next 2 years, you're allowed to do continuing education courses that have no exams, and you can do them from home on your computer. Okay? And the continuing education purpose is just for you to get updates, to be up to date in general, and also know about things that you normally would miss because you're busy working and just earning money. Right? When you're busy earning 200 grand a year, you're really not concerned about what the updates are sometimes because you're just so busy. So they make the continuing education mandatory just to make sure that there's certain things that you know, so that if you have run into a RICO problem in the future, you can't say you didn't know. Okay? They make you take them. They're mandatory, so you don't have a choice. I'll break down how the courses are broken down for continuing education for you. It's a very simple number, but I'll explain it shortly. So just remember with RICO, if there's any complaints or enforcements required, any complaints have to be done in writing. They don't take complaints over the phone. So everything you have to write out to them is by email, or it's by a letter that you send into their office in Toronto. Okay? So RICO's got 12 board members, or board of directors. These 12 board of directors are where there's 9 of them are real estate agents and brokers or salespeople mixed up from many different offices. Usually they're voted in by region and election. So you've got 9 people from there, and you've got 3 people that are directors, and they're appointed from Ministry of Small Business, which is essentially your federal government or your provincial government from Ontario. Okay? So you've got 3 people from Ministry of Small Business and Consumer Services, which is basically Ontario government, and you've got 9 people that have already worked as real estate agents and brokers, and they're on the board. So what happens here is, remember, there's still a separate president and CEO of RICO, and what he's doing is he's doing his time to time. He'll have a meeting with the board to give them an update, to let them know how things are going. So he reports to the board, and the board can help him make greater decisions on how he should do things. But basically, the president and CEO is responsible for the day-to-day management of RICO. Is that clear?
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about what you need to stay fit as an applicant to get registered with RICO. So if you have a bankruptcy, you have to basically declare in 5 days. So every 2 years when you do your renewal, some people have a divorce, some people have a situation, some people have a bad business, occurrence. You will have to disclose that you are filed for bankruptcy in 5 business days, and also provide a list of who you owe money to as a creditor, and sometimes you have to explain why you owe that money. So let's take an example. Gareth, you know somebody who's a real estate agent. He has to file for bankruptcy because he got divorced and he just didn't have the money to pay his bills. Okay? That's a scenario 1. Scenario 2, you have a real estate agent who borrowed $10,000 from 30 people and had to file bankruptcy because he didn't want to pay it back. So maybe the second scenario, as a RICO registrar, you might not want to renew the license of that person based on him not being financially responsible, because you're looking at somebody who's taking money from people and not returning it. And then you're looking at a scenario which is a little bit more legitimate, because it's somebody who's fallen into a snare that he can't help. It's just happened for the sake of what the circumstances were. So those are things that they will look at, okay? And they will look at criminal charges and convictions. Usually there's a lot of issues that come up frequently with criminal charges, are usually the DUI. So the DUI, they'll look at if it's been discharged or not. So that's what they're usually looking for. And obviously you need a work permit. You got to be eligible. You've got to be eligible to work in Canada for sure. Okay. So the education requirement is, remember, you start phase 1 when you register with OREA. You got 18 months to finish phase 1, 2, and 3. Okay? So you got 18 months to finish phase 1, 2, and 3 from the date you start phase 1 when you register with OREA. Now,
is it from the date that you start phase 1, or from
correct.
the date, for example,
you start phase 1.
I went for my a qualifying test or something like that.
No, that doesn't count.
My date start from there?
No, that doesn't count at all. It's from the time you register for phase 1. You have 18 months from there. Because for phase 1, remember, you got to pay a fee. Okay? So once you've paid that fee, you're right in effect the second that they take your money. All right?
Okay.
Now,
so I have a question.
Yep.
Is RICO a board or an entity which we would be having a membership to, or is that mandatory, or what?
Think of RICO. Let's think of RICO as a driver's license office. So when you go to the Ministry of Transportation, you get a driver's license, and you're under the laws of Ontario. So with RICO, you actually get a RICO license that you have to carry in your wallet like a driver's license, and it actually has to be in your possession 24/7. Okay? So every time you're working, that RICO license has got to be in your pocket like your driver's license. You're regulated by a RICO by the federal laws that they put into place that are approved. So you're regulated by them, by the Code of Ethics of RIBA 2002. So like our driver's handbook, for example, would be like a RIBA 2002 where all the codes, like rules of the road, the lights, and all that stuff is written in there that we have to follow. Okay? So once you finish your phase 3, you have 12 months to register with a brokerage or with RICO. So if you don't complete the 18 months portion, or you don't register with RICO within 12 months of completing phase 3, you actually have to start the cycle all over again. You have to start from phase 1 again. Okay?
Yeah.
And then lastly, so we'll talk about the continuing education just so that we cover that. So once you finish your first 2 years of your articling courses, which will then make you a permanent salesperson from being a temporary salesperson, you're still doing the same functions and earning the same commission. Nothing's really different on that side. But this is just for the statement of RICO. The next 2 years after, you'll be required to do 24 credits. 24 1-hour courses or half-an-hour courses. So once you do these courses online, you're allowed to do an extra 8 of the random courses, and you can have them pushed over into the next 2 years. So you can do 32. Now, of that 24, 6 of those credits belong to RICO Update course. That is a mandatory course for 6 credits. There is a brand new RICO Update every 2 years, and you can never do 2 of them to go into the next year. Okay? So when you do 6 credits for RICO Update course, you'll finish that. You'll do 18 random courses of whatever topics you choose, and then you can do an extra 8 of the random topics that you want to choose again, and have a total of a 32. Okay? And those 8 randoms will carry over, and you will do 6 brand new credits every 2 years for RICO Update. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. So for your RICO insurance, guys, it's a 12-month policy, like car insurance. It starts in the middle of August. It usually will run September 1 to September 1 the next year. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so inside of RICO, let's talk about inside the office of RICO. There is a advisory committee, like they're basically like a department that gives advice to the senior staff of RICO. So the Credit Recommendation and Advisory Committee provides only advice to RICO. The RICO doesn't have to take the advice. So the registrar is the person making all the decisions at this case. So the RICO registrar doesn't have to take this advice and apply it. He can listen to it. He can ignore it. He can use it. He can do whatever he wants. He has the sole authority to provide exemption and credits. So what that means is, say Gareth did the real estate course 5 years ago. He calls RICO and says, hey man, I already did the real estate course 5 years ago. Can you give me a credit for phase 1 so I can just write phase 2 and 3 instead? He's going to have to write a letter to RICO registrar, and RICO registrar will make a decision if he wants to give any exemptions or any credits. Okay? So we've already covered the 3 things that RICO covers. Let's look at RCI on the next page. RCI is the Registrar's Complaints and Inquiries Department. So
RICO.
Yeah, so RCI is a process. So if you have a complaint, you're going to send it to RICO, which is essentially going to the registrar. Okay? So when the complaint comes in, registrar is going to look at it and he's going to decide what he's going to do with it. Okay, so he's going to receive it. He's going to make a decision how he's going to deal with it. So RICO's got a very uniform way of dealing with complaints, so I'll address that just as soon as we finish up with the departments. The next department is known as the task force. The task force is dealing with the board of directors right now. So the task force is giving feedback. They're going to identify, do research, and do some consulting and make some recommendations on issues that impact consumers and registrants. And they're just going to provide that feedback to the board of directors. Okay? So the task force is established, just to address these things and give feedback, and that's their only function. They don't do anything else but that function. Okay? So the RCI process, like I said, it's when a complaint comes in, it's in writing, it's reviewed by the Office of the Registrar, and so if the Office of the Registrar determines there's a major problem, and it's got to go to the discipline committee, so the registrar will shoot off the complaint to the discipline committee, and the discipline committee will then decide if they're going to impose a fine or a warning or do nothing, whatever they wish. So the discipline committee will then decide what to do next. Okay? Is that good?
Yep, got it.
All right. So just for the last part of RICO, guys, just so we understand. So when you get registered with RICO, you're going to fill up the application, pay the RICO insurance fee. You're going to get a criminal record check from the police station for $45. Well, that's what the rate is right now. I don't know if it's going to change later. You're going to, if you have an address change, you're going to let them know in 5 business days. And again, this matches up to the bankruptcy. So if you have a bankruptcy or you have an address change, you got to let them know in 5 days. And it's always in writing because RICO doesn't take, they don't take information over the phone. Okay? So you'll have to shoot an email or you'll have to send a letter. If there's any search warrant or freeze order on your behalf, they'll find out, and of course that's going to delay your application. The grounds for refusal, the number one issue is the lack of financial responsibility, like that example I gave you. If you borrowed hundreds and thousands of dollars from friends and never paid it back, and you can show that financially you're not responsible, your application can get denied. Okay? So of course, again, just the last point is the discipline hearing panel, which is the discipline hearing panel is the same thing as the discipline committee. They can assess the fines and add costs as well. So whatever they actually dictate is what will be imposed on the agent and what will be imposed on even the customer if it applies. It all depends on the scenario. Do you guys have any questions for Chapter 2 right now?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay, so as you take, I'm going to load up this video that we've done right now for Chapter 2 onto the YouTube platform. You guys can use this for your review. You can decide if there's any more questions that come up, and you can get in touch with me for that, and we can cover those.
Sounds good.
Okay.